everybody. This is the Torg Eternity Delphi Council Debriefings, where the storm has a name. Once again, we are your hosts, Leamon, Mark, and Jay. And today, our topic will be the Pan-Pacifica Back Perks. Probably a part one, depending on, we have a couple of emails that came in at the last minute that we want to get through. So we'll start with a couple of emails, and then we will get to those backer perks. So the first email is called Chases Running at Full Tilt. It says, "Hi, Leamon and his amazing friends. So you guys are my amazing friends."
Woohoo!
Says, Chases, I love them and I hate them. I love them thematically, but I don't love the rules for them in Torg Eternity. It's as if they almost work, which is something that we were talking about in that Chase episode.
Some of us were talking about.
Yeah. Yes. There was discussion on it. I was wondering if you could delve into a couple of Chase topics that you didn't go too far into. The first is rushing. It was mentioned multiple times that if you're running/rushing, you can't take other actions during a round in a chase. Is this stated in the rules? I thought you would just have a -2 to other actions per the movement rules on page 114. So, wish to clarify, yes, you are correct. The core book has run, and I believe it was in the Nile Empire book. It wasn't stated that rushing is running. There's just a lot of formulas. Basically, what happened is the word run was used for things like flying at 3 times your speed or at a faster speed, as well as swimming. So you would have your base swim, and then when you times it by 3 or whatever the multiplier was to get your running, it just sounded really strange to say running while swimming or running while flying. So the rushing was a term that I used. I suggested it. I think other people did, and then it was put into the rules. So whenever we say rush, we mean run, and run means rushing. That is just -2. I always see it as one of those actions that doesn't require a roll. So then if you want to do something else, that's how the -2 falls into play. That's probably something that I would plan to codify a little more in the 1.5 rules that we get out. That there are things that are considered actions. They would give you a -2 if you multi-action something with them, but they don't require a roll. So if you want to think about it that way, you can as well. So basically, we did say it. We said it incorrectly. I was just going along with the idea of it's an action, so it's your action, and then you want a multi-action, then you get a -2, but that's getting into weeds and picking apart words. So hopefully this clarifies that.
Yeah. Just to be clear, it's because I had been reading about and running a bunch of other systems and got all confused. So it's just a -2, like you said.
So number 2 is distance. This was touched upon, but this is really wonky part of the rules, for me at least. The distance subsection says it isn't strictly distance, but reflects relative positioning during the round, advantageous positions and obstacles, then goes talking about range specifically, and even though it's not necessarily based on distance, you can only maneuver when you're at the same step. Huh? So there's another question, but let's go ahead and I'll give my view on this. It is not based on distance, but it could be based on other things that would not allow you to maneuver. So say you're having a shining moment, the Shining from Stanley Kubrick moment, and you're going through a maze, and you might be close to each other on different steps, and you're blocked by the shrubs or the bush or whatever. You can't get through it or over it, etc. You're on a different step. You might be 3 feet, from the person, but you are blocked in some way. So you would need to get to what step they are at, which would then allow you to, say, cut off their way to go a certain, left or right down a maze or something like that, and be able to maneuver. So that is what I would say, how you would take that into account. It's not like every chase or any type of thing is just wide open space or roads that lead everywhere. You could be driving down parallel streets, and yeah, you can't maneuver the guy because you're not in his area. It might not be a very far distance. It could be one street over or on an off road that you could see, but maybe there's those a railing or something between you and the other person preventing you. So any other thoughts, Jay or Mark, for that? It doesn't have to be distance step, but it still would prevent maneuver, and reasons why?
Well, I guess first of all, I guess you have to really ask yourself, what is a maneuver test?
Mm-hmm.
Like in some ways, I think it could almost be renamed feint, because it's not like an attack that damages someone, but it's you like juking, trying to get them all discombobulated by something you're doing like physically around them. So I guess that's why you have to be kind of close. And I think that the distance between the steps, even though we talked last time very much about abstractions, I think that while the amount of distance is not necessarily described or made clear, or even the same in different chases, it is still supposed to represent some kind of distance. But then we get into the weeds that you were talking about with the whole, it's not that you're trying to get to the same place. It's, has this person caught this person, or has this person escaped? So how close are they really? Does that even apply? You might be trying to go around to cover them. So one could argue that you might not even be in visual range, like you might be around a corner or something. But then if that's the case, how are you taunting them or tricking them as well? So I guess I would just quote from Austin Powers and say, just don't worry about it.
I would add, yeah, I mean, if you're doing maneuvers like loop-de-loos, it doesn't matter if you're doing it way over there and the person doesn't see or doesn't care. Taunt, I would say if you're not in shouting range, or if they don't have their radio on, that might, or they can't see you flipping them off, in your plane to the other plane, different things like that it's perfectly acceptable for a game master to limit other things. But maneuver is kind of you need to be doing something there to them physically. It's the one physical interaction attack, even though it's not damage. Mark, any thoughts to add?
So maybe this is why I like, and this is not I don't take this wrong, guys. This is why I like chases a lot. I see chases as one of the best examples of game mastering as an art form in Torg Eternity, because every chase, can you use the classic Allen Roadster versus the motorcycle or the Jeep in the Nile Empire kind of thing as a chase? And that's what we think about, right? We got a couple of vehicles, or we got people running or whatever, and that's chase, step A, step B, step C, step D. We got away or we got caught. But the mechanic that chases represent in the game really are a contest, and this is why they use the DSR rules, because the DSR rules are the rule set that uses the A, B, C, and D on the drama card. And so you use that same base mechanic to make chases work. You just kind of reskin it, call it something different. And you're using A, B, C, and D to represent the opportunity to advance your cause, where you have two groups competing for a similar outcome or prize or end result. And where the art form for the GM comes in becomes taking the mechanical part of the game and overlaying it over what you've written or created, or the scenario you have for your players, so that it makes sense and it doesn't break the verisimilitude of the fantasy aspect of the role-playing game. We've done game design. The three of us have done game design long enough to know that you work to balance the mechanical need of the dice to show randomness and present an outcome versus the does this make sense? Does this seem real? Does this function? And those two kind of butt heads sometimes. And in chases, in the way that chases are written right now, especially when you start getting into ranged combat and interactions and things like that, you start seeing the mechanics start poking out through the veneer of the game system and break that verisimilitude a little bit. The art form of the GM is to smooth those breaks over and cover them over on with explanations for why the mechanical piece works the way it does in this situation, right? And so when you've got a 45 pistol that's got a max range of, what is that, 80, 100 is long range, and you're in an airplane and you're 2 steps away, why do I have a -4 at long range? I shouldn't even be able to hit them. Okay, well, maybe they seem, you're doing this and coming in close and you're taking that. There's an actual there's an actual World War II event where a guy in a parachute shot down a Japanese fighter with his sidearm. So it happened. It can happen. It happened in real life. Can it happen in the game? Well, the game system, a fantasy world, blends that and melds it and makes the unrealistic or the exception to the rule a little more frequent. So game masters, you got to get creative with that, where you're like, why does this? Think about it ahead of time. Know what you're doing with your chase. If you're going to put a chase in there, why does it work the way that? Why, if they're 2 steps apart, am I going to give my Storm Knights -4 on their ranged attacks against the bad guys if you've got a combat? Why is that the thing? If maneuver is your thing, if you'd rather trick them or taunt them or whatever, why does that work or why does that not work? Because if you're gonna go the other way, if you're gonna tell them no, you can't do that. Well, some GMs are just gonna say, I said no, let's move on. Okay, that's kind of, that's beating a 10-penny nail with a 25-pound sledge. It's a little overkill. And players don't react well to it. But if you say, well, you can't because, and then you give them a brief but plausible explanation, a lot of players just go, okay, and keep on going. So you got a lot of opportunities here. Maneuvers make a lot of sense just because, they got to be close enough for you to affect them. So same step. There's your mechanic. Ranged is the same way. I mean, in two planes that are separated typically by hundreds of meters, because it's dangerous to be close to aircraft in the air, because bad things happen when 2 aircraft try to occupy the same space at the same time. Can you do it? Yeah, the game system says 3 steps away, you're -6. What does that translate to? You decide.
Okay, so there is a bunch of things that you can think about on why steps don't always equal distance, positioning, and barriers, obstacles, and stuff can also provide that non-linear distances.
Abstract, I think, was Jay's word.
Yeah. So hopefully that answers that part. And then it says then there is the whole thing on if it's pursuit. If the predator is further in steps than the prey is, they are not ahead of the prey geographically. If the prey is at step A and the predator advances from step B to C, I would picture it as the predator gaining ground, but the step distance modifier would move from -2 to -4, making it more difficult for both participants to attack. What? So I would say go along with what Mark was saying earlier, that it's not necessarily that person is that far away. There could be other obstacles in there, that even if you're closer, if you're getting closer, maybe you're in a bad position. Maybe you get into a blind spot, or they get to a blind spot because you're trying to overtake them and pass them, and they get into a blind spot. So it's going to be harder to shoot or whatever. And again, leaning into what Mark says, you kind of take the situation that you've created or that is presented and figure out what those negatives come from. They don't always just come from they're farther away and now it's closer. Why isn't it why is it harder? those two planes, yeah, now you have to make sure you keep keeping the distance of your plane far enough away from the other one so you don't crash. That's a -4. Kind of thoughts like that. So any other last thoughts for the distance or for that part of it? When you get closer, it's harder?
There is also a sort of more involved chase set of rules for naval combat that's in Revenge of the Caradon. So that deals more specifically with each step being actual distance. But I think it's like Leamon and Mark said, that the steps don't necessarily have to be distance per se. If the predator is getting closer to catching them, it doesn't necessarily mean that they've gained physical ground, but it might mean that they've blocked off an escape route or funneled them into like an alleyway that there's no escape from.
Right.
But like Leamon said, maybe that they've turned the corner to go there, so you don't have a good shot yet. There's a bunch of debris and garbage cans and things in there that they have cover from. So you have a negative, but you are closer to catching them. But then you get into the question of also the prey's trying to escape. So, figure it out.
Escape doesn't have to be leaving them in the dust. Escape can be, we got into the manhole. and
or you
without them seeing it or hit ourselves.
You got through a door and were able to close it and bar it or something.
Well, and think about in the predator prey example, think about, I thought about this one a little bit. Think about the cheetah and the gazelle. And the cheetah, right? It's got really fast burst speed, really fast top speed, but not a lot of endurance, whereas the gazelle has got a lot of maneuverability and some endurance. And so you've got the prey trying to get away and the predator is getting closer, and options are being eliminated at that point. When you're a long distance away, I can maneuver over here, I can maneuver over here, I got choices, and so does the prey. But as that distance shortens, the prey is starting to get tunnel vision, like, oh my gosh, they're getting close, and they start the -4 comes from I panic, right? The predators got to be really on the game, because that prey is the little snowshoe rabbit dodging from the bobcat or whatever, or the gazelle is doing all it can to get away. You got to be on your game, and you can't make a mistake. You got to be right there. And so as that distance gets shorter, the window of being able to make a mistake and still get your job done is smaller and smaller. So that's why the -4 is, it's showing you have to focus more. You have a lot harder task. The difficulty number has gone up. That to me is why the distance is getting smaller, but because the chases are step A to step D now, the numbers have gone up, and it's harder, because even though the range is at physically closer in a predator prey thing or in that actual chase, it's harder to do.
So hopefully that gives you and anybody else listening some food for thought on how the steps aren't distance and what you can use to come up with the reasons behind it. Once again, thanks for the podcast. It's always illuminates something in Torg Eternity for me. Thanks, Frank. So, Frank, thank you very much for asking that question. And anybody can write us at torg@dcd@gmail.com, and we'll read yours and answer any questions you have. So now let's get to another one. And chases was apparently a really good topic, because this one is about chases as well.
People have feelings about it.
Yes. Hello, Jay, Leamon, and Mark. The chase episode was an excellent dialogue. I found something to agree with for everyone. I agree with Jay in that the rules as written don't quite seem to accomplish what they were trying to achieve. It's just too far easy for a group, especially with the addition of the Destiny cards that allow for steps A, B, and C to be available to players to finish in a single round or two. That's just too easy, and the chase loses its cinematic excitement it's looking to provide within the narrative. I agree with Mark that as game masters, we need to be open to doing creative things with the chase framework. Technically, to be a chase, each person or vehicle is meant to have something to do. I personally like the idea that in a foot chase, you're always running, so any action you want to do always counts as a multi-action. Layer in some terrain modifiers, other special conditions, and you've got all the cinematic input of a movie and less predictability about making that difficulty number X, which would be for each step, as we talked about. I agree with Leamon that it's really about knowing what your players want from their gaming experience. If DSRs work for the table, but chases don't, then do what works for your table. I will suggest that if DSR works for dramatic skill resolution, but not for chases, then it isn't the DSR rules that are at fault. Instead, it's a case of trying to put a shoe the DSR rules on the wrong foot chases. My biggest issue with chase rules as written is that they don't seem to provide the prolonged action sequence, wheeling tires, gunplay, obstacles, etc. I feel like a chase is cinematically supposed to feel like a battle in motion, and sadly, as currently written, the chase rules don't provide that feeling. I have some success with simply not allowing players to attempt more than one step in a chase, regardless of how many steps are actually available. This helps at least extend the length of the chase and allow for some creative actions on those rounds where the needed step isn't available to attempt. Also, I have on occasion not allowed the PCs to attempt a new step until everyone has completed the previous step, a no man left behind approach. Clearly, I'm getting into the weeds here and suggesting things very similar to what Mark has already advocated for, so I'll end simply by saying I'd love to see Torg 1.5 introduce an alternative set of chase rules. Maybe the line manager is listening. I guess that is for me. Signed off, John Omar. So for this, I would say just listen to what we said just the previous email. A lot of the same things apply without having to say them over again. And if anybody likes your rules about, say, a no man left behind, I think that could be a cool type of thing. I would probably do it in certain situations, not everyone, as a, hey, if you get off track, whoever's left behind, is going to have to find a different way to get out. If you don't get on, if everybody doesn't get out now, then, or to the next step now, something happens and that person's cut off or captured or something. Add a little more drama, a little more excitement to things. I wouldn't use it in every single chase, but yeah, I think everything we've talked about for the previous email works for this email. A couple of the thoughts here I think would probably work well in certain chases designed for that. Before we move on to our Pan-Pacifica backer perks, any last thoughts, Jay, on anything that we've discussed, or did we pretty much discuss it all?
No, I think that pretty much, yeah. I mean, we talked a lot about it.
Mark,
I think that pretty much covers it.
Any last words from you?
Yeah, just on the chase as a battle in motion. I don't think that look, the chase rules are what they are in the game system. I use what I've been given. I'm not gonna. They are what they are, and so that's what we use. If you think the step A, step B, step C cards make it easier, pull them out. You're allowed to pull cards out of the deck if you want to. So take them out, and make your villains smart. The drivers of the other vehicles or whatever, or if you've got a pack of villains versus a pack of heroes, make your villains smart. Have a couple of villains stymie. They figured out on step A who the guy is or the gal is who's going to be doing the role. Stymie him. Make them very stymied. Make it harder. Because the villains aren't, maneuver, whatever. Doesn't trick them, taunt them, get them off their game. It doesn't matter. Your villains aren't stupid. Make them smart. And the vehicle rules were designed to, in my opinion, I wasn't there when they were written. Leamon can speak to this, but the vehicle rules were designed, or feel like they were designed for chases. So use them. Use collisions. Use maneuvers. Use ramming. All of the stuff that the vehicles are allowed to do. Use it. And if I think if you want your chases to be battles in motion, that's on your players, because they're not doing the options they're given. They just have defaulted to this. This is the skill we need to roll. This is the number we need to roll. Who has the best one? That's who's rolling. Okay, off we go. Well, okay, assign somebody to a driver. Assign somebody to return fire to the bad guys if you've got a battle going on. Assign somebody to be throwing stuff out of the back of the truck to trick them or to taunt them, right? Assign somebody to, out of your players, the players should be doing this. Assign someone to be the guide, whoever's got the map, they turn here, turn there, assisting the driver or taunting the other guy to put put conditions on the other guy and make them stymied or very stymied so that their chases are not as successful. And if your players aren't picking up on that, make them a little handout that says, here are all the things you can do, and give them a little summary of the stuff so that you remind them that they've got these options in a chase. So it isn't just Lisa is the best dexterity character we've got, and she has land vehicles, and we're in a car, and so Lisa is the driver. Off we go. We're all sitting here back twiddling our thumbs, waiting for this. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Have we escaped yet? Okay, we're done. Okay, chase is over. Because that is boring. I wouldn't run chases.
Sitcom cosm.
Yeah, I wouldn't run chases if that's all the chases were always were. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't run them either. So
I think DSRs and chases especially do really require the GM to provide some of that prolonged action sequence and just like description and really say what's going on, because it's very easy for it to just distill down to, okay, here's our letters. This is what we need to do, guys. Let's do it. And you got to get the players really into it.
Sure. Lead them. It's not a railroad, but lead them into it. You drop them hints like you could do this, or your car looks like it's armor plated. Good for this.
I've played in some games where it's like, okay, guys, we're starting a chase. Here's the card. You need an A. It's like, okay, but what's actually happening, right? You need to add that drama to it. You know?
Like, are we in cars? Are we on motorcycles? Are we running? What's going on?
And that's the art form of the GM. You give them some descriptions. Lead them into that.
So, yes. So, Chase Part 2. So yeah, let's get into the the Backer Pan-Pacifica archetype perks. The reason for this is because, as I stated in other episodes, I go down the lists in the Torg Codex, which is attached to Drive-Thru RPG products, and the Pan-Pacifica backer perks are not in the lists yet. So for all the other backer perks, they're on the lists, and when we're going down the list for the various things, they're in there, and I'm able to read them off and not forget about them. But the Pan-Pacifica ones have not made their way into the Codex yet. So figured, don't want to forget these perks that are available, or that you might have and might have questions about and that. So I figured that we could do that for this perk category. So we'll see how many that we get through in the next 30 minutes or so, and then anything else we can move into a part 2, which we've done a few times on the perk categories. So the first perk that we'll talk about is from the archetype, the second batch, which, to be clear, because I know on the Discord there was some confusion, this is one where the person had transformed. So it is a Cadandran from the planet or the cosm of Candandra, and they were converted to Pan-Pacifica. But since races, you don't necessarily lose your racial abilities when you convert, this one is available to both. So that's why the person is a Cadandran, but from Pan-Pacifica. They transformed at some point. But the perk itself is called Enhance Neurokinetics. The prerequisite is either Pan-Pacifica, Cadandran, and it is a character creation only perk. So if you're playing a Pan-Pacifica or Cadandran character, you will need to choose this perk at character creation. And it is, your brain is wired for all action, all dexterity tests are favored. To be clear, because I know this was something that has been misunderstood by multiple people, including myself when Torg Eternity first came out. When it's talking about dexterity tests or whatever test, if it's an attribute test, it's not a skill based off of that attribute. It is when you're rolling that attribute straight out. So if it's something like a dodge or dexterity, well, dodge is the skill that you should be rolling, so it doesn't count for that. It's when the game master says, I need dex, and somebody says, oh, can I use my dodge? And it's dex, not dodge. That is what we're talking about. So all dexterity tests are favored, and then additionally, once per scene, you can choose a dexterity-based skill test to be favored. So it is a all straight dex that are not skill tests. Those are favored, and then once per scene, you could make it any dexterity-based skill test favored. So, Jay, thoughts on enhanced neurokinetics, and did I explain the difference between attribute tests and attribute skill-based test off of that attribute?
Yeah, at first when you read it wrongly and you think that it's every dex-based skill is favored, you're like, wow! But no, it's only if you are asked to make a pure dex test, of which there are very few.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe there's a lot of pure strength tests, but not very many pure dex. So it's not that big of a deal there. And then the once per scene getting something to be favored, that's pretty good. Yeah, so this is pretty good perk. The fact that you need to take it at the beginning, character creation, as we discussed previously, I don't know if that's even a prerequisite you really need, but it fits into this particular archetype's backstory. And I guess because Cadandrins are like clones essentially that are grown, all of this has been kind of grown as they were batch created. Right. So that's why it's a character creation only. But I'm sure there's some kind of gene mods people can figure out. So if you wanted to do it, but officially, yeah, character creation. So yeah, it's pretty good. It's I don't know if it's like I would take this for sure, unless it was part of my core concept. Favored once per scene is pretty good. I don't know if it's something I would go for right away though.
Right. Mark, your thoughts?
Yeah, sorry, I had a technical difficulty. If I was making a lot of noise, I apologize. I like it. To Jay's point, I'm not sure the at character creation only prerequisite or limitation is that kind of creeps into a couple of archetype or a couple of perks, and they're typically I've only seen them, I think, on archetypes. Maybe 1.5 will make that something different, but I don't know that I would see this one as necessarily having to be, like Jay said, it fits the backer archetype backstory really well. And if your backstory, if you've got a backstory where that's the thing, okay, yeah, run with it. I like the once per scene. I've got a couple of magic items that I got out of Isle for a couple of characters that are like that. That I love the player agency with that kind of thing, because you're like, should I use it now? Should I use it now? Should I use it now? Use it, because a lot of those consumable items like that, they never get used because people are like, well, there'll be a better spot when I use it. There'll be a better spot. Well, these come back every scene. So, play around, use the thing and see if that was the time you should have used it, and learn when you like to use it and when you don't. I will say up front that I was one of the people that read this wrong the first time I read it, because I was like, oh, everything dexterity is favored. Outstanding. That is so broken. No one's ever going to be allowed to take that in my game. And then wait, it's dex tests. It's only dex tests. It's not But when are you going to ever get, as Jay pointed out, when are you going to ever get a pure dex test? Because maneuver, dodge, there are so many dex-based skills that descriptively lend to why I would want to do that versus strength, where there's a lot of times you just need to bash through something with your fists, or you need to lift something,
swim.
or
Right,
swim. What else is out there? Strength.
Climbing, unless you have a harness, then it's dex.
Could be.
But yeah, I agree that being dexterity tests being favored is cool. And then I also am a fan of the once per scene favored type things. So then it's not, and you can widen it. It's not like a say a whiptail, which is Ednos, and they can reroll an unarmed combat.
Favored in unarmed combat. Period.
This is any dex, but you as a game master, as a table, definitely would not want every single dex test, because there's
that's overpowered. That's broken.
So I think that this fits really well, not broken. So yes, so we will move on to the next perk, which is based for the Psychic Cat archetype, and the prerequisite is Psychic Cat. Cats seem harmless. Most people would not think to attack a cat instead of a human. So if a cat is not offensively engaged in melee combat, any opponent that wishes to attack the cat must succeed a willpower test versus the cat's telepathy if there are other available targets. So if you really want to shoot the cat, you can try, but the cat's a psychic cat, so he's trying to use his psychic abilities to just say, hey, I'm not a threat. So Jay, thoughts on the inconsequential perk for the psychic cat?
So question about that. On the character part, it says that that's a racial perk. I'm assuming that's not a racial perk, actually, right? Like, it's not
prerequisite,
every cat.
You got to be a psychic cat.
Yeah, well, but not every cat has it. Because if you look at the cat's race, they are cat, not psychic
cat. Right. That's probably a psychic cat
because racial.
Otherwise,
if it was racial, then this cat is owed another perk. He's only got psychic mutant, right? So I'm thinking this would be like, so if you choose to play a psychic cat, do you get this for free is what I'm asking. I would think you still need to spend one of your 2 perks on it.
Yeah, it would not be a free one. No.
Yeah. So the perk itself is pretty good, because obviously if you're playing a psychic cat, you're going to ramp your telepathy up pretty seriously. I would be what's the word I'm looking for?
Cautious?
I would not cautious, no, more the hesitant. Opposite. I would be much more liberal in my description of what offensively engaged in melee combat means. Because sure, if the cat is like jumping on you and scratching your face, you can attack it now. But if it's like sitting over there throwing lightning bolts, so I would think if the cat is obviously doing not normal cat stuff and is obviously like attacking and like affecting the combat in a meaningful manner, I would let people get away from this. And this perk would be kind of more to get into position or just wander around freely. I wouldn't like, otherwise there's just so much room for abuse, I would think. But with that caveat, that's pretty good. Imagine just looking at this and not be like playing a cat in general. This perk seems fine.
Mark, your thoughts on the perk?
So on the surface of the perk itself, it's kind of a nifty idea that, I appear fuzzy and cute and unthreatening on the surface, but underneath I'm psychically beating the crap out of all of the mooks in the room and blowing up things with lightning bolts and all this, but I'm just kind of sitting there casually in the corner. And so naturally, Pan-Pacifica Kanawa troops don't look at a cat trying to think that that's the thing that's juking us up real bad. Let's go take the cat out. So it's got this nice force bubble of don't look at me. I'm not over here. Right. So that, on the surface, that's kind of a cool concept. I like that from the standpoint of, is it a cool concept? Yeah, it is. Now let me put my organized play hat on for a minute.
So
we have
hold on one moment. For those listening, to organized play is a large group of people who play. They get together, and you can play under different game masters with different people. So setting that up for our viewers and listeners, so they understand.
Yeah, it's a shared
campaign.
It's a shared campaign. We have a campaign document on DriveThruRPG that's free. It's pay what you want. You can download it for nothing, and if you give us any money, we use it towards the organized play. We approached all of the perks with banned, restricted, or open, and the Psychic Cat was banned in organized play because, as Jay pointed out, there's a lot of room for abuse on this one, and there's mostly what we decided was there's a lot of problematical table variants on this. What the player has envisioned this should do is going to end up getting played differently at this table A versus table B versus table C, and where one game master we call it table variation, and you can expect some of it because, like we say on the podcast, it's your Cosmverse, so you run it the way you want. We try to make the experience fairly same across all tables, but you get table variation, and because of the way that this comes out, you're just going to end up with a lot of table variation on what an attacking cat. In this case, the cat is completely ignored. No one ever attacked it the entire 4 hours for a whole mission, and it just absolutely blew the crap out of everything. And in this table, the player's not happy because he did the same thing that he did at the first table, but now he's getting targeted left and right because they've figured out the cat's blowing up everything. Now, from the standpoint of the villain, if I figure out you're what's blowing me up, yeah, I'm going to shoot you.
And you don't want to get Leamon as game master did it this way, and I got to do all this.
Exactly. And so to preserve the feel of the game and to keep the ill will from building up, because I built this character to do a thing and nobody will let me do the thing, it's just not going to be allowed in the game. So we banned Psychic Cat. Well, on the surface, is it a cool perk? Yeah. And it makes perfect sense. I am a cat. I am not, you would not think of me as this psychic powerhouse, but I am.
So yeah, it's one of those.
Cats are OP. They don't have to pay extra for their gear like Dog's body does.
Right. Because they wouldn't like it.
Well, they wouldn't let you put them in a ballistic vest anyway.
Right.
But no, I'll agree with that. I think it's a cool perk. I would probably be a little more, as Jay used the word, liberal in the if it's using some non-flashy stuff and it's not noticed, hey, the cat's the one doing this, then that's fine. If the cat is noticed as being the one causing all the problems,
the originator,
then
source,
then you go off. And I do like the idea that if you think about it, maybe that cat is, then it's putting up its telepathic powers to kind of prevent you. So it's that's the difficulty number, is its telepathy. And then you still get a chance to, shoot it if you succeed and you understand the cat.
I would say from a home game standpoint, if GMs, if you're gonna use this, or players, if you're gonna lobby your GM to use it and they allow it, you ought to work out ahead of time what constitutes a cat in combat, what constitutes a villain realizing the cat is the one causing the problems, and saying up front, these are the things that will trigger me to be able to attack you, et cetera, right. So that everybody going into a player and GM understand what the dynamic is around this perk.
And do you need to make the test every time you want to attack it, or just the first time you want
and that's up to the GM, and work that out, but set that up ahead of time before, so everybody's expectation is the same.
Right. And if it's a, after 2 lightning bolts coming from the cat's paws, everybody realizes that, you can do things like that and figure out what powers it has. And, these powers you buy free, these powers maybe give a find or evidence analysis check for the
or give them an up on their test.
Or whatever. So, and then, maybe
something
it's favored, and then it gets up, as many times as it happens. So, yeah, I like the perk, and this is one that player and game master can come up with some rules so that it's not overpowered and it fits. Everybody can have fun with it. So let's move on. The next one we're going to do is the mermaid perk, Merform. So this is based off of gene mods, and when activated, the Storm Knight's legs turn into a merm tail, or vice versa. They also form gills on their neck, allow for underwater breathing. The character can only change to legs when they are mostly dry. Likewise, changing back to the merm tail requires they be mostly wet. Game Master's call. And yes, this is definitely based off of Splash, the movie. Because this experimental technology is not perfect, once per act you may invoke a Merform change either way as a disability to complicate your life and gain 1 possibility. So as a player, say that your mermaid with the merm tail is swimming and doing some stuff and you need or want a possibility, you could say, hey, Game Master, I would like to have my legs or my tail just randomly change to legs, my gills to go away, my character to be in peril to gain a possibility. So that puts the agency on the player, which I think is pretty cool. Alternately, the Game Master may suggest a complication. So if it goes the other way, the Game Master's like, hey, would you like to have 2 possibilities? They could suggest a complication, and then you can get 2. So if you suggest it as a player, you could get 1. And if the Game Master finds a way and says, hey, would you accept this? And you say yes, then you gain 2 possibilities. If you don't, then you don't gain possibilities, but it doesn't happen. So, Jay, what are your thoughts on Merform?
I think this is actually a very good perk. This is normally Mermtail is $5,000, so it is half of your gene mod allotment. And this does not use any of your gene mod allotment. So even though you're paying twice as much for it because you're using a perk slot, it doesn't dip into that budget if you are taking other gene mods. Right. So you still have the full 10K for the rest, for any other stuff you want to do. So it's essentially giving you half a perk plus half of the disability perk to form 1 perk. And this can be a pretty nice possibility farm. You will need to agree with the GM, or I guess the GM will have to be very clear about what kind of things count towards being a complication, much like with pulp power limitations. It has to actually limit you in some way. Like, yes, there has to be a problem. You can't just be like, oh, I dripped coffee on me and it got wet and turned my tail on while I'm in the car in the back seat. Oh no. It's not gonna help. Now, while you were driving, that might be more of an issue suddenly.
Or I'm wading through a stream that's waist deep. Oh, I get legs. Oh boy.
Yeah. So stuff like that would not give you possibilities, at least I wouldn't. So just be clear, don't expect it to be raining free possibilities on you. I do like it's very fate-like in that the GM can offer possibilities for things as well. And there's lots of other untouched possibilities for this perk as well. If you're in the living land and you can tell people that you're blessed by some ocean god and whoop, mermaid tail, they won't know what's going on. You could potentially use this as the basis for a lot of trick or persuasion tests, all kinds of stuff. So, and when we were talking about this before filming, there was talk about like, oh, how often are you in the water? But I would actually say a surprising amount of Nile Empire adventures seem to end up underwater at some point. Like at least a quarter of them that I've run, I think.
Yeah, but they're in domes.
Yeah, but when you hit the dome, you go legs, so you're fine.
There's always a leak in the dome, though.
Whereas somebody who actually took the Mermtail gene mod is stuck with the tail. This gives you the best of both worlds. So this is, if you're even remotely thinking of getting a Mermtail, this is like the no-brainer.
Right.
Take this. Right.
And I want to say there was a couple of, maybe an Aurorish and a Pan-Pacifica Delphi mission where I had the same character on both of them and ended up in the water. And the one time I was happy because I had bought the sealed lungs that allow you to like hold your breath up to X many rounds, and I was doing it for poison, but it helped with the water. So yeah, this could be an unexpected boon.
It's worth noting, it says prerequisites none. So does that mean like anyone can take this?
Yeah,
like,
it's like the second.
So it's like a
it's like a
so
curse.
it's like third generation gene mods, essentially.
Yeah, third generation.
So you could be a Thargold character and take this, what have you, or you could be a cyber. So what happens if you have cyber legs? Well, never mind. Don't worry about that.
You have to complicate things, don't you, Jay?
Mark, your thoughts on Merfolk?
So, yeah, this is what initially I was looking at this like, I don't know that I would ever take this. But as Jay was talking about, I'm like, okay, I can see how this would be. I would think from my perspective, you have to be willing to RP. Because if you're not willing to RP with this perk, then I would suggest not taking it. Especially with the disabilities portion of it, because that to me that's what balances it out, right? Because if it's something I can turn on or turn off at will, okay, that's kind of a little overpowered. But if you make it into something where I have to be dry or I have to be wet in order for it to happen, and we go down the route of splash, then when you get a complication on the card or hero setback, or you get your nemesis shows up again and you're on dry land and they know all they've got to do is get you wet and your life gets more difficult. Yeah, you get some possibilities out of it, but now you have to RP the fact that you're in the middle of a death trap under a pyramid getting buried in sand with your nemesis who just specifically brought a bucket of water because they're your nemesis and they know you, and they threw it on you, and now you don't have legs anymore. You have your tail under the pyramid as the death trap's going off. You're getting buried in sand and you have a tail and you can't run anymore. Okay, your life got harder. Here are your two possibilities. Get out of the death trap. I see that as a great, flavor way to make a mission really, really a lot of fun. And for the rest of your Storm Knight companions, really, really difficult. Unless they just want to say, we didn't like her very much anyway. We're just going to leave her in the death trap and we're out. Yeah, but again, as Jay pointed out, game masters, don't let this become a possibility. This is not a license for players to possibility farm. If it's just like, as he pointed out, just like with limitations, if it's not an inconvenience, like a problem for whatever you're doing, no possibilities. It's got to be in the death trap and you can't run, and someone now has to combined action, or two somebodies have to, in addition to whatever else they're doing, they have to make a strength test DN10 to carry you out.
Or you're having to rush to be able to move at your normal
flop.
Yeah,
you can flop on the ground, but it's a -2 to everything else you're doing because you've had this happen before. It's not your first rodeo, so
right.
you're like, oh, here we go again. All right, here we go, and you do the worm, and you're flopping because you know what you got to do. But that make like Leamon said, -2 to everything else. Now it's combined action. That's a nice. Yeah, that's
complication.
Good. Complication. There we go.
Okay, so yeah, we all think that this is pretty flavorful. can be used a little bit more than what you might think, and the complication can provide some really cool role-playing experience. So we will move on to the Converted Priest. This archetype has a perk called A New Path. Prerequisites are Spirit 8+, and at least one add in Faith. Basically, it is the background is this character was an atheist who's the possibility wars happened. They saw miracles being invoked all around, went, hey, that stuff actually works, and then you converted. So you can choose a miracle list from another cosm, and you gain 3 miracles from that list. And these miracles, because they are from a different reality, always cause a 1-case contradiction for you. It could be up to 4-case, but it always would cause a 1-case contradiction. So, Jay, what are your thoughts on A New Path?
That depends on the answer to a couple of questions.
Okay.
So you get a miracle list.
Right.
So is that now the only miracle list you can use?
I would say that it would count as having that miracle list for anything that requires it as a prereq.
Okay, so you could take the further on things?
Right. I would say so, yes.
Okay,
so you're not limited like some of the others where you no access to any other miracle list?
Well, then you would. I mean, if it said...
That was the next question. Could I have, say, if it's a Korth character, and again, this is not limited to any cosm, anyone, as long as you have 1 add in Faith and Spirit 8 can do this. So could I, if I was a Korth character and I had already miracles in something here, could I then take this to also gain access to another cosm?
I would say no, because it's based off of you not being
so it's not stated
like,
as a prerequisite, but that's in the backstory. So that was the big thing that really was going to change it for me. And then having Dabbler, so being able to do 1 miracle count towards it.
I would say on that one, maybe that's what got you in. You dabbled, you got
maybe
1 miracle, and then hey,
so as long as
this stuff works.
If this is giving you access to multiple faiths, I would say that it's like crazy overpowered. If it's just letting you take 1 outside of your normal cosm, and that is the only one you can take, then it's probably fine.
That's how I read it.
Okay.
How I understood it when I was going over with the backer on it, how it would work.
Yeah, in that case, then it's pretty good. It gives you 3 miracles right away, and it doesn't specify that you have to blow one of them on ward enemy. So that's pretty good.
Actually, so you get to choose all. You get to choose all 3. That's the bonus. You don't have to get because normally, even if it's not ward enemy, you're stuck with something. And this would allow you to choose any from that list, and then the other side, the downside is they're all contradictions because they come from a different reality. So a give and take, which I always love. I love twisting things, giving a little bit more, but taking away over on the other side.
There's a certain point where if you're already going to be a contradiction anyway, you may as well just go all out with it.
Mark, your thoughts on A New Path?
I like it. I like it for all the reasons that Jay said. It's and I like the backstory on how you got to where you are. I would, and I agree with you too, Leamon, on the you get access to that set of miracles, that list. Only that one. You cannot, barring some other perk. I would almost like to see the verbiage on this changed somewhat to say, and no other, and like other things say, no access to any other miracle list or something along those lines. just because, as Jay pointed out, if you could have miracles from over here and miracles from over here, you're a little OP at that point. Or, miracles from all over the place. Can you take this multiple times and become kind of like what's his name from the Mummy, where he's sitting there and he's got that chain full of all the different faiths. Like, I got miracles over here. Which miracles work on you best? Okay, well, now I'm going to be this guy over here. But again, I'm going to put my Torganized Play hat on for a second. This is an open perk in Torganized Play, but we made a small verbiage change on it in that last sentence. These miracles are always at least a one case contradiction for you. And the reason that we decided we were going to put in the words at least in there is so that somebody didn't make the argument that I'm only ever a one case contradiction. Because you can absolutely be a 4 case depending on where your character is from, because there's no racial perk on this. You can be, I think this is open to anybody with a Spirit 8 and 1 add in faith. So you can take this and you can start doing cross cosm. You can be from this cosm over here, but take the perk list from over here, because according to the list you met a religious leader. Okay, well, I'm from Pan-Pacifica and I met an Optant. So now I'm taking the Living Lands list. Or I'm an Adinos that met a Buddhist monk and now I'm taking the Palin list, right? Whatever, however you want to go down that road, you can. And I love the idea of doing it. The rule of 2, that's the rule of 2, right? But if it's a contradiction to you, and it's a contradiction, where is your 4 case contradiction? It's not an only ever 1 case contradiction. And you could have some people argue that the statement here makes it's only ever a 1 case. I'm never a 4 case with these miracles. Yes, you are. You could be. So that's why we changed it. But other than that, I think it's a lot of fun.
I would say my memory, if I recall correctly, that was the intention of it. It's always at least. So if this appears in a future thing, we'll probably add that one word to solidify,
or just however you want to clarify
it. And then maybe up in a prereq, just say this needs to be your first, or maybe you could have Dabbler first, but no other list to start with. But it's
I could
again
see you
one
taking
of those.
It later, though. I don't know that it'd have to be at creation.
No, I
could
said
see
it has to be your first miracle.
Oh, no access to any other list.
Right, at least to start off with, type thing. But again, when we have backer perks, we're even more constrained by pages, because you have the front page that is completely
you are.
the mechanics and the attributes and your ads and all that, and then the second page you have your overview, tactics, moments of crisis, blah blah blah, your advancement track, your artwork, which is a fourth of the page. So we're really limited with what we can put down on that. So when they get to a future book that gets them, then we can do the fine tuning. But we'll go ahead and stop here. We're just over an hour. We'll get to the other half in the next episode. So we do want to thank you for listening. Remember, you can write us at torgdcd@gmail.com. We will read your comments, your questions, we'll answer questions, etc. It looks like we had about half or so that were really good, solid perks. So we'll have to see what they are for the second half next time. Having said that, we hope you have fun in your own Cosmverse. Bye.